Birthplace of the Vile is the final nightfall of Season 16's Conqueror title. I have seen mixed opinions on this strike. I personally thought it was one of the easiest strikes of the season. I have seen feedback ranging from about the same to it was harder than Lightblade, so I guess we will approach this place with some caution. Loadouts, subclasses, mods, it's all the same stuff, as I've been saying for the past 5 videos. You are going to need unstoppable rounds and overload rounds. I brought a Divinity yet again. This is not the best season for non-Divinity overload weapons. I would just do yourself the favor and bring Divinity. It's not going to hinder you. Now, this is where I will slightly differ my advice compared to previous strikes. This strike has a lot of moments where you need to be clearing out a lot of enemies at once as they all spawn in. There are several step and stay on the plate sections here, and letting even one screeb near a plate could mean that you wipe. My teammates used Ager's Scepter and Trinity Ghoul as their exotics, and then I was on Div. The person on Ager's was not using anything super crazy in terms of the rest of their kit. They were on a Sentinel Titan, and our Well of Radiance was running Trinity Ghoul. Trinity is great for AoE. Ager's is also great for AoE or just crowd control of an area. This also means that everyone will need a legendary power weapon if you're copying our loadout, but with linear fusions being as good as they are, Threaded Needle with Void Burn active in this strike was the natural choice. If you wanted to run G-Horn and Void Rocket spam like with Royal Entry, that is certainly an option as well, especially given how much power ammo you'll be generating thanks to Lucent Finisher and all of the champions that you'll be using that finisher on. Ager's will require a bit more special ammo though, so maybe throw on Special Ammo Finisher if you think you're going to need it. You could also run blinding grenade launchers if that's more your thing. You could run Wither Horde if that's more your thing for your AoE lockdown. I just prefer to kill things outright as opposed to blinding them with grenade launchers. If you wanted to bring in Arbalest for shield removal specifically, I would not say no, but bringing all elements of weapons should not really be a big deal here. I actually really liked Well of Radiance in this strike. With Phoenix Protocol, in case that's not implied, there are a lot of spots where it's going to be useful thanks to all of the hold the plate sections and sections where you'll be killing big groups of adds, including in the boss room. It actually feels like it's a strategic choice compared to everything else where Well is just sort of the, I don't know what I want to do, so I'm just going to put on Well default build that people might be running. That being said, if you didn't want to run it and wanted to use Stasis or Void, Osmiomancy Gloves, or maybe Controverse Hold Grenade Spam, that would be totally fine, but I would recommend having some sort of defensive thing for the boss room. Well, Ward, maybe a Stasis Turret might be okay too, I just haven't tried that specifically. Titans and Hunters, you can continue to run the same old stuff. A Ward or a Sentinel Shield will work just fine. I would probably skew more towards Ward if you only have one Titan. Night Stalker Hunters, you can throw on Orpheus or Omnioculus, depending on your playstyle. I would wear Orpheus just for the burst damage. Mod-wise, again, the same old is going to work here. Your standard Finders, Champion mods, Void Resistance, and Scavs will do just fine. No combat-style mods are really even needed. If you wanted to experiment with any particular mods, be my guest, but I don't think you need to go out of your way too much here. The strike up until the boss, I think is actually pretty laid back, save for some plate sections. The intro might throw you off a little bit. There are some snipers that you'll need to keep in check, but this shouldn't be a huge deal. Some linear shots will take care of the mini-boss here, same with the champion. Again, spam those finishers on the champions. Everyone can have Lucent Finisher on if you really want. You will be drowning in power ammo, especially if you throw on Aeons, which at least one person should. So use that power ammo liberally. This very first plate was a little weird to tackle at first, but once we split the Agers and the Trinity Ghoul, it was pretty smooth sailing. In fact, I would consider this very first plate to be the hardest part of the strike that isn't the boss encounter. If worse comes to worse, spam your stronger ammo on these enemies, save for a super, whatever you need to do, but Trinity Ghoul should be able to keep these non-stop spawning adds down, and Agers can just AoE freeze everything. No killing should even be required, I guess, unless they unfreeze. Have your third person standing on the plate to activate it. You can use whatever ammo you want here as well to kind of help out, but Trinity Ghoul and Agers should be doing most of the work here. The next section that might give a little bit of trouble is when you get outside and have to go up some stairs into a building. There are a lot of enemies watching the door, and they are very ready to throw a lot of grenades at you. Poke down anything that you can see from the doorway before heading inside. If you have a super available, which you probably should by now, this is a good spot to pop one so that you can just break through and start progressing into the room. After this, you're going to head through a portal and go down a super long hallway. I don't think there's anything very special here other than a bunch of screebs, so just keep your distance, and this hallway should not be a very big deal. After that hallway, you will find the next plate room, of which there are 2 plates. But first, you're going to have a couple of unstoppables and a handful of regular red bar enemies. Feel free to, again, keep your distance and linear fusion these dudes down, opting for a finisher if you need the ammo. These unstoppables are not that threatening at all. Just kind of stay high up and shoot down. They should go down, no problem. We went to the right side plate first. I don't think it really matters which one you do. If you're facing the stairs going down back to the middle, you will have enemies spawning to your left about 90 degrees and then also down the stairs. You should treat this the same way you treated the first plate that you did, except that you now have even more space and probably some supers to burn in case you get into trouble. The majority of the enemies here are going to be screebs, then you're going to have some lurkers, and a yellow bar chieftain. Most of the screebs will probably explode each other to death if you're using AoE weapons. Lurkers are probably a little more annoying, I would say, than the screebs because of their shield. But if you're able to stay on the plate the whole time without needing to get off, this should be very, very quick. It's almost the same deal on the other plate, except enemies will spawn from 3 places now. It sounds a lot scarier than it actually is, though. Our Trinity Ghoul player was able to wipe a group of enemies with a couple of shots, and they could cover like 2 of the spawning sections. Same with the Agers player. The Agers player wiped out everything. This is why I recommend these weapons. It will make these sections so simple that you won't even need to think about them at all. The room after this one gave us a little bit of trouble, but only because people died to grenade spam. Just be ready for some grenades to fly in, and for the unstoppable champion, this is not a room that should be a big deal. After crossing the chasm and dealing with a wave of 2 overload champions, you'll head down the big staircase. You're gonna fight a mini-boss, bunch of champions, and some regular enemies. I don't think you need to do anything special here. Keep your distance, plink away at targets, and then slowly push down the stairs as you generate space and as you need to get closer for more accurate shooting and fewer range penalties. Take your time here, not a big deal, no rush. The boss room is another reason why I recommend the weapons that I do. It's because you will have big waves of enemies spawning in pretty frequently. Without decent AoE damage or crowd control, these can and will become a big problem. They're going to swarm you, they're going to throw grenades, they're going to get turned immune by the immunity totems, but with Trinity Ghoul or Agers, they can basically die as they spawn in, leaving you with a lot of time to plink at the boss before the next wave comes in. This is where Well of Radiance is also really good, as you can drop it behind cover and reliably get maximum super energy gains from it. In fact, if you can manage to get a well for each phase of the fight, this should be a cakewalk of a boss. After a third of the boss's health, you'll again go down that super long hallway with all the screebs. Same thing, just take it slow, kill everything, shouldn't be a big deal. However, when you get to the end, jump in the portal together, as enemies will spawn when the first person goes through it, and you do not want to spawn enemies without everyone there. My team's default positioning was to this left side box, so after the teleport, we went right there and dropped a well. You can also drop a ward if you have that. You'll have an unstoppable spawning in very shortly after the portal, basically right next to you, so be ready to take it down immediately, followed by the rest of the enemies, which will include 2 melee wraiths, so just be aware of them. Take note of immunity totems that may come into play, as they will absolutely mess with you. Do not be afraid to rotate and reposition if the need arises, which it probably will. You should be ready to be mobile on a moment's notice. You can see in this clip that I start rotating as soon as I notice the boss and all of the enemies are immune, so that I can give myself space to destroy this totem to kill all of the ads. The boss is also going to be very mobile. It's not going to just sit back and spam. The boss will run up on you, so be ready to move and reposition and use cover. Give up the well, give up the ward. Space is much more important than standing in one of these buffs, because you can still die in them. Whenever you get a good clear on a wave of enemies, unleash big damage on the boss to get you through the phase faster. When the boss loses another third of health, you'll again be teleported to the chasm room. Nothing special about this either. Just get across, go into the portal together. Maybe be aware of the overload champion, because I'm pretty sure it's a sniper and it'll one-shot you. Just note that stuff in this room may walk all the way around and flank you. Just keep your eyes out, and this can also happen the first time you're in this room. Just look behind you every few seconds to make sure you're not getting flanked. When you come back for the final time, you'll have an overload and some enemies this time instead of an unstoppable, but you can handle it the exact same way. Throw a couple of grenades, hit a stun on the champion, drop a well, and just wipe everything out. Then it's all hands on deck for the boss. Nuke it as fast as possible, but don't get complacent. Keep watching for spawning ads, because one grenade from a stalker can wipe your team. Otherwise, you should be good. Again, crowd control and AoE damage weapons are the keys to an easy run. Trinity Ghoul, Agers, whatever you want to use will be just fine. Just make sure that you're using something that can deal with groups of enemies reliably. If you do that, this strike should be one of the easiest ones you do all season. Thank you very much for watching, and congratulations on your Conqueror title. I will see you next season for Conqueror X5.